Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the MinnMax Show podcast. Dare I say, a bonus episode of the MinnMax Show podcast. Thank you for being here. We're a place all about friends, games, friends, and getting better. I'm Ben Hansen, joined by Jeff Marchiafava.
That's me. Friends first.
That's right. Friends first. Kelsey Lewin, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. And also joined by the madman himself, Howlin' Kyle Hilliard.
I'm the games.
He's the games part. Yeah, Kelsey's the getting better, I think, because I don't know how you have time for us in your schedule, so thanks for being here. We wanted to come to you, we wanted to invade your ears and eyes in a tasteful way to talk about a couple showcases in particular, because if you're not glued into the scene, the hip, cool gaming scene, Summer Game Fest, as Jeff Keighley would beg of us to call it, is happening right now. So there's so much news to cover, so many press conferences, a lot to unpack, and there's just too much to pack into one basic episode, normal, boring episode of the MinnMax Show podcast. That's why we decided to rip off this bonus one. We pulled the emergency alarm. So we will be back later this week for a regular episode of the MinnMax Show podcast. And in that episode, we'll be talking to Sarah, Janet, and Leo, because they're actually out in LA. As of the time of this recording, they're at Super Nintendo World. Thanks to your support on Patreon for shipping them out there, and they're making a whole travelogue to document their entire process. You can check out MinnMax's YouTube channel to learn what it's like to actually go to Summer Games Fest and Super Nintendo World and all that fun stuff. So in this discussion on this bonus episode, we're talking about the Xbox Games Showcase. We're talking about Ubisoft Forward. There's a lot in there. We're not talking about the Capcom Showcase. We'll cover that later in the week because we have not seen it yet as of the time of this recording, but we'll probably still touch on a couple Capcom games here and there. But Kyle, I don't know if you're sick of this question yet, man, but how are you feeling about the season so far? The not quite E3 season.
It feels nostalgic.
Yeah.
Like it feels it feels close to an E3, which is fun. And there's been like a lot of good showcases. Like we'll talk about Xbox, but I think maybe my expectations were too low, but I certainly was watching it and then afterward sort of reflecting on it. I'm like, wow, that was really good. That was a lot of good stuff in there.
I know. It's nice to have. I feel like, people were a little bit down on PlayStation, a little bit down on Keighley's Summer Game Fest, even though we were like, there's good stuff in there. There's good stuff to talk about. It was like halfway through the Xbox showcase, you'd be like, wait a minute. Are they killing it? Like, this is shockingly good with the variety and the pacing and everything going on here.
And the nudity.
And the nudity, which we can definitely unpack. But then, talking about being nostalgic, it was funny with the Ubisoft Forward because that was just a bizarre vibe, but I appreciated it. But it really did feel like this is just some Ubisoft press conference from like 2013 or something. It felt like we were going back in time, like small stage, awkward moments, a lot of people talking on a stage and all having varying strategies for how to engage with the crowd, but the overall message of let's all talk as slowly as possible, even if we're doing
I feel like a lot of people had a similar strategy, and then one guy came out with plastic neon glasses and had a very different strategy.
All right, yeah. So the guy came out in the middle of Ubisoft's thing to talk about the Captain Laserhawk Netflix show, which is the Blood Dragon inspired, not quite adaptation, but inspired by Blood Dragon, Far Cry 3's DLC. Their whole show.
Not to be confused with the Dota Netflix show, which is Dragon Blood, I believe.
Okay, please, we beg of you, don't be confused about it. But yeah, he definitely changed the tone where it's like he's going for jokiness, like dressed up all sci-fi and stuff. But Kelsey, how would you describe it? I know you're on board for it. It's in the beginning. And then how did it evolve?
I thought it was a fun way to come out. And then I think he really just kind of overstayed his welcome kind of thing. It was just a lot of, I think the way I described it in our reaction stream was basically just like he keeps looking like he's having a conversation with one person and waiting to see their reaction. But that's not like, this is a press conference. You're presenting. You're not like, don't look for our reaction. Just keep going.
Yeah, there's a weird energy of a guy coming out, the producer for this show, and being like, get a load of me. Look, I'm dressed like a big laser guy. It's like, Have you seen laser E3? Guy. Like, this is barely registering for us, dude. Like, I know you think it's like the wackiest Halloween costume ever worn, but trust me, we need to see something more interesting.
Come back when you're a giant car,
Yeah, a nice spinning car like a gentleman.
Yeah, I part of that, thinking back on it still, I'm wondering if they like told everyone not to clap or have any reaction to it.
No.
Because it's like, but 40% of that audience or whatever was Ubisoft employees. So
know.
you'd think that at some point, like, you know, Eve would look behind you and like people would start being like, oh yeah. I mean, like the guy who came out to talk about the racing
crew?
game or whatever. Yeah, like people were cheering throughout his entire presentation.
He was
for
charming.
no reason other than that they work for Ubisoft.
Yeah.
And I feel like there were so many times when our dragon friend guy would say something and then look around and look like he was completely embarrassed, that it feels like is this a gag? Is this what they're actually going for? Is he actually not cringy and he thinks that this would be a funny way to present this thing?
We can't. You guys, they announced so many new games. We can't.
I hope
we
so.
can't focus on this one guy who was really trying hard to sell a bit. On the
I mean, honestly, hey, just maybe final thought on it. Show looks cool. I love that Castlevania Netflix show.
Yeah,
we'll check it out. Sure,
we'll check it out. Sure. But yeah, Ubisoft Forward, it was a little slower pace. I like that they had some deeper dives into the gameplay and stuff. You know, even if there was kind of, you know, the occasional beat of like, now we're going to show the Division, now we're going to show this, now we're going to show this. That's not the most exciting stuff, but like still solid. I mean, Ubisoft versus
getting to see more Prince of Persia was great. And like, we'll talk about it more, I'm sure. Star Wars looks very cool.
Yeah.
You know, like I liked those selective deep dives. I was appreciative of those.
Man, let's talk about that Prince of Persia. I know we talked about it in the last episode, but seeing like extended gameplay of it from Ubisoft is another reminder. It's like, God damn, it looks so good. Like, it's really shocking. There are a lot of people in the chat who were screaming about it, just shouting, but they were comparing it to that Strider reboot from like 2014, saying like, oh, it kind of has that vibes. And it's interesting, even last time we talked about it, like, oh, it's kind of, they're going for a little bit of a Prince of Persia 2D Metroidvania type thing, but to be very clear, their exact wording was, it's a semi-open world with new powers leading to new secrets, but they did not exactly say Metroidvania. Why not say it?
They did in the press release, though.
Okay, that's nice. But when you're on the stage during your showcase, just say the genre that everybody likes. I don't understand why you dodge it like that.
Only Keeley can do that, man.
Yeah, I guess.
Only he can say Pokemon with guns. Metroidvania, Prince of Persia.
But what'd you learn from this gameplay demo that we didn't know before, Kyle?
I mean, I guess I didn't learn a lot. I was just Prince of Persia has like weirdly become like for this, you know, last 5 or 6 days, like one of my favorite things that was announced.
Yeah,
like it was a big surprise and it looks great and it sounds great. And so the opportunity to see more gameplay and get a closer look at that combat was just sort of confirming my excitement of, you know, that I had from seeing it initially.
Yeah.
I'm just mostly surprised that I was like, one of my big show winners is a 2D Prince of Persia platformer. I never would have called that a few weeks ago.
Well, I think part of the thing that really helps it too, and I think Ubisoft did a really great job. Normally they're a pretty leaky ship over there, but like two of the biggest surprises of the entire thing, like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown and then Star Wars Outlaws, like both of those didn't leak. I know they announced that Massive was working on a Star Wars game, but any details hadn't leaked, which I think lets it really have an impact, and it makes like this game in particular maybe punch above its weight for, you know, a good looking 2D game. But it's like, man, the fact that it looks this good and we had no idea it existed and didn't expect it at all. But yeah, seeing gameplay, like the big thing is, okay, there are time powers and you can use it in combat to do kind of like a tracer style rewind and stuff. Did you understand how that worked, Kelsey?
I mean, sort of.
Okay.
I'm sure it'll be intuitive when you play it, but yeah, just sort of a like, I don't know, that I'm blanking on. There are other games, like platforming games, that have done this and done sort of like a quick rewind. Was it The Messenger that did that?
I don't know.
No.
I haven't played too much of that.
I can't. It was something like that.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I just don't have an example off the top of my head. But
Yeah.
it's
Right.
definitely- Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it looks cool. I don't know for sure that it's going to be used in this way, but I always appreciate that kind of stuff because it, it can make the game a tiny bit easier and a little bit more approachable. Like you can make a mistake and then rewind it a little bit, and I like that kind of, I like that kind of stuff in a game where I want to feel like I'm good at it when I'm probably not that good at it.
Yeah.
This game looks good.
Yeah, it's exciting, you know, in the industry right now where everyone's moving towards games as a service, bigger and bigger games, multiplayer focus, yada yada yada. We've talked about it a lot. Just to have like, it looks just like a small, compact win from Ubisoft. Like if it is as good as it looks in the videos, like coming out in January, here's just a small 2D Prince of Persia that is going to play well. It's like, that sounds ideal. That's what we want more of the bigger companies to at least try. Just carve out a little development time on the side for weird stuff like this. But Jeff, what do you want to talk about, man? Out of everything we've seen.
I guess we can talk about Avatar a little. It's not super high up on my list, but it was like 5 minutes into the gameplay presentation, I was just like, oh, this is Far Cry, but in the Avatar world,
right?
And that's not a bad sell for me, because I am tired of Far Cry games in the Far Cry world. So you know, a different setting and some different powers, and just kind of obviously it's gonna, you know, have a big focus on story. That might be interesting.
No, I am totally with you. I've defended Avatar too many times on this podcast, but like, I think maybe it's just from Ubisoft's last Avatar game in 2009, which was, you know, not great. Mm-hmm. Everyone kind of, maybe I'm projecting too much, but I certainly had like a little bit of reservation in the back of my head about like, I don't know how this thing's going to actually turn out. And then during the entire gameplay demo, it was like, this thing seems so much bigger and better than I was anticipating, having just open world first person Avatar game. Kyle, what do you think of that whole thing?
Yeah, I think it looks cool. I mean, I think I had seen assumptions that it was going to be first person, but I don't know if that was fully confirmed. That's like the one thing I was like, I was kind of hoping for more of like a third person kind of platformy. Like I'd rather run and jump around Pandora. I'm less
exactly
interested
what I said.
In like shooting from the first person perspective in a Avatar game. But that being said, like I think the simple pitch of like Far Cry Avatar is pretty solid. Like I would like an open world section of Pandora to kind of run around and explore.
Yeah, it's like a new clan you're working with and all that stuff. And the idea is like, okay, instead of taking down just an outpost like you would in Far Cry, and maybe we're hitting the Far Cry theme too much. The idea of like, okay, you're taking back Pandora from the humans after the second wave of them coming. So it's, you know, in the time frame of Way of Water. But then as you take back the human bases and like destroy them, then like Pandora will like grow back in that area, and then you can go and find secrets there and stuff, is the way they pitch it. And so like the whole idea of wanting more platforming, running and jumping, like they did tease something about that idea of like, you are going to be not exactly open world Metroidvania, but you're going to be getting new abilities and stuff like that, and recruiting your banshees, and you can name your banshee as you fly it around, Kelsey. Just think of the possibilities.
I just name everything Mito after my bird.
Okay, well that sounds cute. That sounds great. Yeah, they didn't make the mistake of bringing James Cameron out on stage again like they did back in the day to talk about that Avatar game for 360, where he talked for like 45 minutes because he's James Cameron. He's a blowhard. But man, like the more I hear about James Cameron's working style, like I feel scared for that team at Ubisoft Massive about like, God, you want James Cameron to be like a little involved, but if you ever came by the studio to give notes, it'd be a freaking nightmare and you'd never be able to shift the game. Like, I was just listening to this interview. Oh, it's Roger Deakins' interview, podcast, the cinematographer. And he was talking with a cinematographer who worked on the first Avatar and also True Lies and Titanic. And it's shocking how just kind of openly he was talking about what an a-hole James Cameron was. Like, not to the point of fully burning the bridge,
He's
but
pretty
just
open
like,
about it too, I think.
I think everybody is a little bit. But yeah, I'm excited for this thing. I think it looks really great. It's coming out December 7th, 2023. So it's kind of plugging the hole between the two Avatar films, I guess, if you want to see it that way. But and then also, yeah, it's a single player, or you can play 2-player online co-op. But Jeff, do you think there's going to be a bunch of games as service nonsense in here? What's the downside? Because everything we've seen, I think, is looking surprisingly good for the Avatar game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping not. I think that potential downside is it ends up being a lot more Ubisoft open world formula than we're expecting, and it's like, okay, we're doing, the same 5 or 6 activities that you do in every Ubisoft open world game.
Right.
just with a different skin. But hopefully the IP offers a little more opportunity to try some new things in it, and it's not just okay, now climb this stone tower and figure out how to get to the top and activate it.
Yeah. Kelsey, what do you want to talk about? What's on your list?
Can we move on to the Xbox showcase? Is that
whatever?
Or just bounce it around?
Just bounce to whatever the hell you want.
Okay, this is a weird one to start with, but I want to start off with a particularly chaotic one, which is that weird game Metaphor ReFantazio.
Yes, I was hoping you were going to go this direction.
Yeah, the creative team behind Persona 3, 4, and 5. It's supposed to be, an RPG, and they showed a lot of stuff, and I am no closer to understanding what this is other than it's clearly made by the Persona people, and so I will probably like it, but that's...
And so to be clear, because this is one thing I wasn't sure about, like, it's not just like Atlas. Right? Like, this is what they're doing instead of Persona 6.
So it is the director from Persona 5. And I guess they announced it a while ago as Project ReFantazio. They announced it 6 years ago that they were working on this thing.
All right.
So I guess when Persona 5 shipped then, I guess, with that timeline. I guess that's how it works out roughly.
2018?
Yeah, so they've been working on it forever. So I guess like the hardcore fan base was like, finally we get to see this. And it's a more fantasy-based take on Persona. But like when it started... I was like, is this Tokyo Mirage Session? Because it starts with like shots of Japan and then it kind of looks fantasy based, but then there's also some kind of more steampunky stuff in there. And so I was totally with you, Kelsey, where during the showcase I watched it and I was like, oh, this seems cool. All right, there's a lot going on here, but I can't wait to watch this later and really unpack everything that I see. And I went back and watched it today just by myself in the quiet light of day and like, I still have no idea what I'm looking at, but it's like a shot every half a second. They're showing so much, but just my brain can't comprehend it.
Yeah, absolutely excited for it, but absolutely no idea what it's about at all or what. I mean, like you said, it was just so many cuts. It was like every 2 seconds, a different line from a different part of the game.
Yeah.
And it made no sense. I also, am really regretting how much praise we gave that team for the Persona 5 UI because boy, are they just going so overboard with it in every game now. Like, I mean, we might talk about the tactics game and the Persona 3 remake and everything, but like those two and this game, every time they showed UI, I was like, I regret how much we all celebrated that because that seems to be the only note they took from that. It's just insane, over-the-top UI.
Yeah, could be worse. But yeah, that is the wild thing is like, having a new IP from, one of the most talented RPG studios around on the Xbox stage. And then not only that, like they went so deep into Atlas here because then they also announced Persona 5 Tactics, P5T, which is kind of
Tactica.
I'm sorry, please forgive me. Yeah. So it's kind of like a chibi-ish looking version of Persona 5 in there. But I
thought it was going to be Persona Q because that's what those. Did you ever play those like mystery dungeon Persona games?
Yeah.
Like I assumed it was going to be that, and then it was Tactics. But it's very much the same style, and I wonder if it's the same team.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But then the other big thing was the Persona 3 remake, which unfortunately leaked a little bit ahead of time and all that stuff. But it's weird because they just released the remaster, like their showcase last year. Xbox was proud to say, hey, you can play Persona 3 on an Xbox, on Game Pass. And then now, 1 year later, it's like, and we're doing a full remake of Persona 3.
It kind of explains why that remaster was kind of disappointing. Like it was like missing a lot of the animated cutscenes, and it was the PSP version, which limits like you don't actually have like 3D character movement between combat. But in that version,
I like that more. I think
some people do.
There's no reason to physically move your body through the halls of a high school in Persona 3. You clicking on it is just as effective.
Hot take.
I get my big thing was certainly like the missing cutscenes because they couldn't include it in the PSP version because of size. And it's like that you need to like insert that back in for the re-release here. But anyway, and so now the remake's coming, so it's like, okay, any complaints you had about that? It's like, well, just wait.
Yeah. Did you play Persona 3, Kelsey?
I've played it through 2.5 times.
Jesus Christ!
I know. I've played it. Well, I played Persona 3 Portable through twice, and then the like PS2 version I got like halfway through, and then was just like there's other than the cutscenes, like you mentioned, there's really not that much new in it, besides just the fact that you are physically walking around instead of clicking on things. But yeah, I played through the story as like the main protagonist, and then Persona 3 Portable adds a female protagonist, so did that, and yeah, it's fantastic. It's one of my favorites, so I'm a little annoyed that I have to play it yet again, but but also excited to.
Yeah. I saw people were bummed out that apparently the woman protagonist isn't in this version of Persona 3, that it's based on the original. Is that right?
That's a bummer, but I mean, it's still like that always felt like another good way to play the game, but not like you have to play that version of the game.
Okay. What stands out to you from the trailer? Is there anything that really pops since you know the game so well?
No, not really. Like it just, I mean, they didn't show much that I recall that was like, oh, that's different. It was just like, this looks nice. Yeah. I'm hoping the dungeons are better in this game, because they're just very like random, procedurally generated and not interesting in Persona 3. They get better at that every game, and Persona 5 is where I feel like they finally actually designed something rather than just kind of, had something procedurally generated. It's fine if it's not, but I hope that they've at least done some design work on it, so it's a little bit less like, because sometimes you'd reach a floor and it would just be like, oh, this one's really short, oh, this one's really long and annoying, and there would be no rhyme or reason to it.
Oh, weird. They say early 2024 for the Persona 3 remake, and then the new game Metaphor, that's coming out 2024. Apparently, it's not a Xbox exclusive or anything that I've seen. Let's see where to go next. Let's maybe change the pace a little bit. In the Xbox showcase, one of the early things they showed was a new game from Compulsion Games, who made We Happy Few. And I feel like it's been a big mystery for a long time of like, we know they're working on something new. I'm really curious what it's going to be. And then there was a game called South of Midnight, which had a trailer which looked stop motion-y, very Coraline inspired is how they put it and stuff. And I was curious, like, is this just the trailer? But according to like a little interview they did on the Xbox Wire, it seems like no, in the game they're also going to go for kind of a Coraline look for the overall art direction. But Kyle, what do you remember from South of Midnight?
I mean, I like that sort of stilted frame rate look. It's funny, my reaction every time I see that now, which is a lot in animation, is like, oh, Spider-Verse.
100%.
Like, that's the big takeaway everyone took from Spider-Verse was like, we don't need a F24 a second. We can drop that down to like 15 or whatever it is. I don't know what it is.
12, and it looks more charming.
I mean, it looks cool. I don't really have a sense of what the game is other than I like the way it looks.
Yeah, I think they could have used a little bit more. Maybe it's still too early to show gameplay and stuff, but they actually went into a lot of detail on Xbox's site. So apparently it's a third-person action-adventure magical realism game taking place in the American South. And so you play as Hazel, who's that main character, and it's a little Witcher-esque where she's going around the American South, like jumping between locations, trying to find and patch up the tears between worlds. It's not a multiverse thing, but where crazy monsters have come through. So basically just an opportunity to run around in the American South and encounter all these wild myths. And so, shades of Kentucky Route Zero in there. I'm curious to see how many people are going to be lured in by it.
I feel like every magical realism video game takes place in the South. Like, wasn't there another one that took place in like
water
Louisiana?
To wine, something like that?
Yeah, the detective one. We're not going to recall it, but I feel like every one is like takes place in the South.
That's funny because a huge part of that Xbox Wire interview is David Sears, who's the creative director for this thing, who is also the creative director for Rainbow Six Patriots, that canceled Ubisoft game, and I got to spend a couple days with him up in Montreal years ago, and he struck me as a very bold guy, Rainbow Six Patriots, very bold take overall, with being, hey, you know who the real terrorists are? The United States military. It's like, okay, this is an angle for a game. So I like knowing that the creative director at least likes to take big swings, but a big thing in that piece on Xbox Wire was him talking about like, not enough games take place in the South. Like, it always just feels like a parody of itself. We want to give a well-represented, what he said, honest love letter, because the South deserves its time in the spotlight. So Kyle is a man from the South. I guess, Kelsey, do you count yourself as a woman from the South?
It's weird because I've been in Seattle now for almost 11 years, and I was in Texas for almost 11 years. So it's like, it's very, it's fading, but.
Well, where did you grow up? That's the question.
Texas. Like I went to.
You're from the South.
Yeah, I went to high school and most of my school years in the South. So.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's much magical realism happening in Texas. No offense. It feels more like a Louisiana. That's magical.
Oh, totally.
You know?
Well, that's where the like sort of voodoo stuff is. And I mean, it feels very organic to come from that part of the South.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to say cautiously optimistic about this because I also thought We Happy Few looked fantastic, and then I didn't think it was fantastic, unfortunately. So this again, I love this style. I think this looks cool, but I'm not going to get my hopes up quite as much as I did with We Happy Few.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. I hear you. I was excited hearing them talk about in that little piece about focusing on the music and how like each city that you go to, each location is going to have like a different interpretation, different version of like focusing on blues and gospel music. And it's like that all sounds really cool. Even if the trailer didn't exactly blow us away, like we're watching it, like, is this the Dreams campaign? Like, what am I looking at here? Because it has certain crossovers with that main character. But Kyle, what stood out to you? What do you want to talk about next?
By the way, the game I was thinking of magical realism in the South was Norco. That's the one.
Norco. Yeah.
I want to talk about Fable.
Yeah.
Actually. It's another instance where like I don't really have a sense of how that game is going to play exactly, but I think what that trailer did was establish tone, and I like the tone.
Nailed it.
I was very excited to see it's Richard Ayoade is how you pronounce his name
from IT.
And I was like, okay, he feels like he absolutely belongs in Fable, and he's just one of those comedians that just can say anything and it's funny. And then the twist of him being the giant was like fun.
Yeah.
So like I've been excited for new Fable since we kind of had an inkling of who was making it and that it was going to exist. This trailer to me was funny, a good tone setter, and also just a nice confirmation that Fable is happening. Like we are working on it. This is probably in game, presumably.
Yeah.
Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if it did turn out to look not quite that good, but it was exciting for me. It was mostly just a confirmation of Fable, and I was happy for that.
Yeah, I'm totally with you.
I also like before they got to all the giant stuff. I like the idea, and I don't know how much it will carry over into the game, but I like the idea that heroes in that world are all kind of jerks, and everyone just kind of like tolerates them.
Right.
And there was one scene where like the hero like kicks a chicken into the horizon or whatever, and there's a guy going by with a wheelbarrow, and he's like, yeah, very good, like and it's just like you have to just kind of placate them,
right?
And that was kind of a funny like it's a funny direction to take what otherwise usually is like those games have always just kind of been fantasy games with kind of a sense of humor, and whether the humor, I think the humor also stood out to me and worked better for me in this version. And I like the idea of kind of being a brash, jerk who's like supposed to be the good guy, but everyone's kind of like low key annoyed with is a funny take on like traditional fantasy RPG.
Yeah, not much role playing for you there, Jeff.
That's
right. Yeah, I'm totally with you. Where it's like, hey, thanks, Kelsey. Thank you. I'll be on the podcast for another 30 minutes. No, I'm totally with you. Where it's like, I have full faith in the developers, like Playground Games. After working on so many Forza Horizon games, I just feel like they're so talented for just even open world RPG, even though you're in a car design. So letting them do something new, I'd imagine it's energizing the hell out of that team. So it's like development and developers, I feel confident about like nailing the tone. I think it's so hard to make a funny game trailer. I think this trailer nailed that. And so 2 of the 3 are down. Now it's just, there's the whole thing about the gameplay, I guess.
the actual gameplay.
Yeah, then we'll see. But no release date for Fable, but cool to give folks a big update for that thing. Let's see, who wants to go next? Who's got something they're excited about?
Can we talk about the new Yakuza?
Yes, please. Now, I'm not familiar with this Yakuza series that you're talking about, Kelsey.
Yakuza? Oh,
I
this
don't
is
think so.
sorry. What are they calling this one? It's Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. That's right.
So good. Yeah, honestly,
Yeah.
I was thinking about it yesterday. I was sitting in my yard thinking that subtitle for the new Yakuza / Like a Dragon. This is basically Yakuza 8, by the way, for everybody watching and listening.
Well,
But-
wait, real quick. That's my question. Is it Yakuza 8 or is this a different game?
Nope. This is Yakuza 8.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Infinite Wealth. That's
Okay.
They're calling it Like a Dragon 8, and now they're calling it Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth.
Yes.
Okay, because I thought it was a standalone Ichiban game.
No.
I thought that
Okay,
could
okay.
be the case too, but I wasn't sure.
Nope.
So-
Yeah. So they tried to
Okay.
clarify a little bit, like in a press release update, being like, it's the 8th main installment of the Yakuza series, and I wonder
Got
if they're
it.
even going for like infinite wealth, like the infinity sign, like an 8 sideways. Like I think they're playing with some of that in there, but like infinite wealth is such a good subtitle for an RPG. It's such a weird idea of like, I'm going to be grinding for money in a game called Infinite Wealth, and that's a very funny idea.
I also think that like infinite is a subtitle that is used, with somewhat frequency, BioShock Infinite or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
And it's like to me, it felt also like a play on using the word infinite, but then infinite wealth, like
Smart.
yeah.
And
I don't know. I am so excited about this thing, knowing absolutely nothing about it. I am just such a huge fan of the Ichiban character
Yes.
that like it truly does not matter what I've seen. Like you can just show his face and like thunderous applause from me, and I'm ready. So
But dude, honestly, I think like
They showed a little more than his face.
they showed a little more than his face.
So for everybody, if you haven't seen this trailer, you need to see it. It's a very Austin Powers or Simpsons movie or opening of DMC 2013, where it's Ichiban waking up on a beach and being like, why is everyone looking at me? And then he's naked, but he doesn't realize it. And so they're constantly hiding his crotch as he's walking around this beach to great effect. But you do get to see his butt for the perverts out there. So congratulations. But genuinely, like, you say like, oh, I barely know anything about it. But like, in terms of a tease, I think this absolutely nails it. It's just him waking up on a Hawaiian beach, like Waikiki, it looks like. Ichiban's character who's only been in Japan, and then at the end he's just screaming, what the hell is going on? It's like, yeah, this is how you tease. Like, I am so intrigued, and maybe it's because I love Like a Dragon so much, but like, this is the perfect mystery of just a weird teaser. And it's like, I am also wondering what the hell is going on. He's just going to be in Honolulu for the entire game? That sounds amazing for a premise.
That would be a very fun twist.
Yeah.
And I think would definitely revitalize all like the approach to storytelling for that series, and would be super fun. Like as soon as I saw that, because I always try playing the Yakuza games and then I eventually bounce off all of them, and immediately I was like, oh, okay, this one's interesting. This one's back on my radar of just like there's so much potential there, comedic and otherwise, for what you could do with that premise.
Yeah, and it's so weird too because like I like playing those games in Japanese, so it's so weird having this trailer where Ichiban speaking in Japanese, and then it kind of like broke my brain. Like, wait, there's just like a blonde lady on the beach speaking in English. Like, how is that going to work for just language settings? Like, if Ichiban is going to be Japanese the entire game, but I'd imagine that everybody. Like, that's what I want. I want everybody speaking English except for Ichiban, at least for this. I'm sure it's going to be just one little area and he'll find friends eventually or whatever. But this game is confusing, Kyle. You are right to be confused about if this is a spinoff, because there is Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, which they also showed a trailer for in some other showcase. I forget where that was a couple days ago.
I think that one was Summer Games Fest.
Okay. Yeah. And that's the new Kiryu game, which is between 6 and 7.
No, he doesn't have a name.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Naming in this series is getting
no way of
messy.
knowing who it is.
So this man who erased his name, that game takes place between 6 and 7, and that's coming out this year. It's coming out in November. But then the part that's weird is that Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth has dual protagonists. So you're playing as Kiryu and Ichiban, but it's the RPG style from Like a Dragon. So I know they want this to be a grand new entry point with Yakuza 7 and stuff, but I already feel like it's getting so complicated and weird for like, this is blasphemous, so please forgive me, but I just really like a Dragon and Yakuza 7. Like, I would be happy if Kiryu wasn't in this game at all. Like, I feel like there's so much baggage now of like, okay, I need to play Like a Dragon Gaiden later this year just so I can be a little more caught up on the Kiryu storyline, so I understand the dual protagonist thing better for this new game, which is, I don't know, a lot of weight.
I do feel like it would be totally fine, and maybe they're just scared to do it. Like, it is totally fine to just, to just branch the paths here. Like, it does not have to include every character you've ever created for this series.
But also, it's weird to have this rising trend of like dual protagonists in games. If we got Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and then Alan Wake 2 coming out in October, and then Spider-Man 2 coming out in October. It's just a bizarre trend. I guess if you want to include Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart on PC, let's rope that in.
That's cheating.
Yeah, I guess you're right. But it is just weird how it's like, oh yeah, everybody's into dual protagonists for single player games. That's the new trend. But let's see, Kyle, what do you want to talk about?
Star Wars Outlaws.
Yeah, biggie.
Yeah. I mean, cool initial trailer. That was during Xbox, right?
Yep.
Okay, it gets all. But yeah, it really sang to me watching it on Ubisoft, where they just showed like a big chunk of gameplay.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Maybe I just am not paying enough attention, or I'm just dumb. But I was like, oh, this is the Han Solo game.
Yep.
That's like what this is. Like, it took me like watching gameplay for 5 minutes to be like, oh, she's okay. That's the other side of Star Wars that we're getting to play as, is the Han Solo side. And it looks cool. It looks great.
Yeah, I mean, even in that first trailer that Xbox showed, I mean, one of the first shots you saw was Han frozen in carbonite, which also is just a nice beat to be like, this time it's between episodes 5 and 6. Please, you know exactly where this is happening. But yeah, that's the weird thing. So it's a huge open world Star Wars RPG from Massive, the same team also making the Avatar game, or the same studio at least. I'm sure different teams within that Swedish studio. But yeah, that was the thing, is watching. It was like, man, it's weird to see this and be excited about it and be like, oh, this is kind of just the culmination of Project Ragtag that Amy Hennig was working on at Visceral. Because they were also going for kind of the scoundrel with a heart of gold storyline there. But it's like, okay, now we're taking it, but now it's a woman protagonist. Kay Vess is her name, and she's got her little alien buddy named Nyx, who's going to be the alien version of BD1. So for everybody confused, you can just grab onto that.
Or the shorter Chewbacca.
Short Chewbacca, some would call Nyx, yeah. But it looks awesome and huge. I'm kind of getting scared of it. Like, just, going back to Watch Dogs, and probably before that even, Ubisoft has had a rough, trend of promising too much in their first big gameplay showcases and then having to scale things back. And like, this looks so good and so big that, Jeff, do you understand like how the world's going to be structured? Because you look like you could fly the ship out of the atmosphere, and I'm like, how is this going to be coinciding with that level of production?
I wonder if they were just putting a crosshairs on it while it was transitioning into space, and that's when you actually got control of it. It was when they first showed it on the Xbox showcase. I thought the character was like, a custom character,
right?
Because it didn't. I guess I wasn't expecting a bespoke character like that. And then during the actual gameplay segment, what stood out was that, like, we know it's a big open world game, but what they showed felt more in like the vein of an Uncharted mission, kind of like very story heavy, very, like character driven. And then we'll take you through what felt, like a pretty set kind of action set piece moment kind of thing. And then we watch her run out into a giant open world. But yeah, that has left like this question in my brain of like, okay, are, like very focused missions, but everything that I know about Ubisoft open world games is like, we're going to give you a big map with activities everywhere, and none of the activities look or play like that segment did. So that has me very intrigued, a little worried, a little unsure of what to expect from this.
And that's just like one world, but then imagine that it's like, and then we're going to all of these planets, and it's like, well, how
a bunch
is
of
that
different planets.
Working? It seems huge. There's a weird thing too, and I'm curious if they ever say anything about it, but like the aspect ratio is different for this game compared to everything else we've seen, unless you want to go back to the Order 1886, which YouTube chat during our reaction stream pointed out we should call it the Order 66.
It's funny because Blake Hester, when we were covering it, was like got super excited about it in our Game Informer chat.
Really?
And his point of reference was like, yeah, bring it back like 1886. and I don't think I would have noticed if he hadn't said anything. And I was like looking at it, I was like, I think this is really cool. I like that it gives it a different sort of cinematic kind of vibe. You know, I mean, cinematic is an overused word to describe video games, but it's like it's a simple thing that I don't know. It was kind of working for me.
Well, I remember that was the big thing too of with the Order 1886 when it's just like, you know, extra black bars on the top and bottom if you want to be simplistic about it.
And Jet Force Gemini.
And did it really?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. But I remember everyone was just like, oh, you're cheating the Order 1886. Like, it's truly one of the best looking PS4 games, but it's cheating because you're not rendering pixels on 40% of the screen or 30% of the screen. It's like there's something to that. But I'm curious if this is just for the gameplay reveal and to accommodate for extra wide monitors, or when the game ships, it's going to have this too. But that's enough about that boring stuff. But yeah, Kelsey, I like that you pointed out her hair is super 80s, like perfect Star Wars hair.
Yeah, well, and I didn't catch the Han Solo in Carbonite or whatever thing, so I like that. Yeah, it is very clearly like not only are we showing you that it's set here, but also like everyone looks appropriate to that time period down to the hair.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems like the main character, like they're trying to make her seem like she's okay, she's in the criminal underworld, but she's kind of just getting used to fighting and stuff. Like, it's a pretty telling thing that the first punch she throws in the trailer, she's like, ow, ow, my hand. So it seems like she's kind of easing into this world. And so, you know, again, this game looks so good and so big that I can't help but poke holes at it. I'm starting to just worry, like, okay, is she going to be a little obnoxious? She seems good so far, but I feel like the industry over the last couple of years is super sensitive to obnoxious protagonists in open world games. So we'll see how it goes.
I don't know. I'm already so much more sold on her than Carl that I'm there for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that is the weird thing.
Do you think Disney is like, you can't do customized character like for Star Wars because we need them to be in the canon and we need to be able to reference them in the future?
I was wondering that too, and I feel like for what I mean, they've done them in the past, haven't they? But I feel like it would always
KOTOR.
always be like either you are A version of that character or B version of that character, and it's always a set character. So yeah, I wonder if they just don't want to give people that power, which feels weird because so much of all of the messaging of Star Wars games is like, come live in our galaxy, and like they made the LARPing version of come be your own Jedi in this in our Star Wars world, but they won't give it to us in a video game.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I mean, I could see if the game does well, you know, them bringing her in. They got the big Ahsoka show, and then kind of the show that's going to be the climax of everything kind of taking place after Return of the Jedi and stuff. So they've cast it, you know, a real actor who looks like that. So I could see her being in the same spot as Mr. Carl Kestis from Fallen Order, just like fingers crossed that finally they get brought into the live action world for the big crossover film that's coming up in that timeline. But there's a weird moment too. Did you see that where like she's talking to an Imperial soldier and you can bribe her or not bribe her, and she chooses not to bribe her, and then she's leaving, and then like her face is on all the screens in the little cantina, and then like a big wanted text thing comes on the screen where it's like, are they going for like elements of GTA in here? We're gonna have a wanted level from the Empire. It's such a cool idea.
I mean, the wanted thing went like over your screen and stuff too. Like, you know that you are wanted. You need to get out of here. Yeah, very, very GTA.
Yeah. So it looks suspiciously good. If you haven't seen this thing, also there's ship combat and, you know, dogfighting in space. It looks awesome. And coming in 2024 for Star Wars Outlaws there. We'll see. In theory, this could be a little bit of a wait for this thing, especially if that same studio's shipping Avatar next year. It's bananas. Who else has got something? Who wants to lob one out?
There are so many things in this Xbox showcase.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even know how we're gonna get to all of them. But the Capcom game that looked kind of like Onimusha, but wasn't.
Right.
The Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess looked really cool. I really liked the art style they're going for there, and just, I don't know, it just looks like good old fashioned Capcom action fun. Yeah, no, for sure. I only hesitate to talk about it just because there's probably more revealed by the time
we're talking about this because it's probably in the Capcom showcase, but totally. Yeah, there's like starting out, it's like, is this Onimusha? It's like, no, it's something new. And yeah, Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess. So it's cool. Again, I mean, it's, everybody always lobs criticisms at Microsoft for not making enough headway into the Japanese market, but like this showcase, they're pushing for it, man. Everybody but Square Enix apparently is at least talking to them and working with them in a big way. Sorry, Kyle.
I mean, is it, I feel like I'm finally sort of excited about Starfield for the first time.
Ooh, yeah.
Of this.
Yeah.
Because I really, to the point where I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to play that game. Like, honestly, like, I'm not a big Bethesda guy. Like, I always dabble a couple hours with Skyrim and Oblivion and stuff, and that Fallout. But this was, like, the one where I was like, I finally got excited, and the gunplay looks good.
Yep.
Like, the gunplay looked so much better than last time they showed it. Now the question is just, like, the intimidation of scale of that game. It just looks absurd. Like it feels like they've like barely scratched the surface after a 45-minute presentation that was just absolutely loaded with stuff.
Yeah.
But I now consider myself excited for Starfield for the first time.
I'm 100% in the same camp with you, where I've never been a Bethesda guy, and it's like, oh, Starfield, I'm happy they get to do something new. I don't know. Even like, some stuff we saw in the past, like the shipbuilding, like I'm intrigued, but I thought that showcase and that Starfield Direct was so well done for laying it out in a way that it fully got me in. And it was the ship stuff in particular that really sold me.
Handsome, we know it was the room full of sandwiches.
I'm sorry,
you're full of stolen sandwiches.
No, but I think they did a really good job in the presentation. First of all, of like not just being like Todd Howard, which feels like it's so much of that in the past, but actually showing like different members of the development team talking, and they had like one person in particular was like, I'm the wacky lady. Come to me and I'll tell you the weird stuff. But my
ships look like platypuses.
That's exactly it. She's like, yeah, you can make animal-themed spaceships and you can customize your ship in such a weird way that we've actually just made like a mech, and it's just kind of like stupid-looking Gundam with boosters on its feet, like taking off into the sky. It's so smart.
This game is so versatile. You can make stupid looking things.
Yes.
Here's a stupid thing we made. And I was like, thank you for showing me that. That looks amazing.
Yeah, exactly. But I thought it was incredibly smart. And so like, yeah, focusing on the ship building, and then also just the idea of like, you can just attack enemies in space, dogfighting in space, and then you can board their ship and then just take their ship back to your bay. Like, that is the stuff that's like, ooh, I haven't really personally done that in a game. I'm not playing a lot of free space or whatever the hell.
Yeah. Go on their ship and murder them all in first-person combat, and then once they're gone, you can just steal their ship and build up a fleet of your own ships. That feels very much of an extension of the kind of open world shenanigans that you get from Bethesda games, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to do that the entire time, and I'll probably never touch the main stories, which I usually don't.
Yeah.
My big question still, like they showed a lot of, interesting stuff. I like that they said that even for the procedurally generated planets, which are whole planets, you'll land and they will kind of, like generate interesting stuff around you that's a little more kind of like actual human created content for it. But it's still, my big question still is, how many planets are just you go there and you mine some stuff? They even said that like only a very small amount of planets actually have life, just like in a real galaxy or whatever. And it's like, okay, how many are not going to be interesting? And every time they would show like
995 of them probably.
Yes. That's exactly what I felt like, because every time they'd show giant, like weird alien species walking around, it's like, that looks cool, but if you're making all those by hand, how many planets are you making them for? And is like, are 50 planets going to have animals on them, and is each planet only going to have 3 species? Because that's still way too much, like for human beings to design by hand for these kind of things. And it's just that they've set such a breadth of content that they have to make, and how much like there's you can only make procedurally generated content like that, so interesting. And so they spent a lot of time showing the stuff that actual humans worked on, but I still feel like there's that second layer, and what's the balance between those two?
Yeah, it was interesting how they mentioned that, like, you going to a planet, it'll be different if your friend lands on that same planet compared to No Man's Sky, where it's procedural, but every planet you can play co-op now at some point. I mean, the obvious comparison here is No Man's Sky, and there's a lot of, I'm sure, wiggle room in there for comparisons here and there. But
well, I think the thing that was like kind of getting me excited about it is like I don't really like No Man's Sky. I don't really like the procedurally generated stuff. But it seems like if it's your player like me, that's fine, because you can just focus on the story or something. Like there's so much there that like the procedural stuff is there for a different type of player, like that's kind of what I took away from it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Curious. It was interesting seeing chat get really excited about so many of the gameplay things, and then every time they focused on like, and here are the factions in the story, and here's a quest, and it just does. It's some real Bethesda facial animation. You can see everybody just like, okay, but still everything else looks so cool. Like there's definitely kind of the main story quest, or just the presentation is still a little old school.
Yeah. There was a moment in it where they were like, we have completely upgraded our character customization, and in fact, every NPC we used to create their faces for it. And it was like, I knew that from the beginning when you first started showing those characters. It's still not super impressive, but yeah, the faction stuff, like, first of all, no one wants to hear about that when you're doing a showcase like that. That's going to be something that you actually get to when you start playing, is when it's going to be more interesting. But to me, at least, those factions have always just been about, like, you pick your playstyle and the type of missions that you want to do, and those are the mission dispensers. It's like, okay, you like sneaking around, then you join the Thieves Guild, I'm not super concerned about whether, I'm sure the story is going to be Bethesda's story, and it's like, all you got to do is keep giving me missions for the type of gameplay that I want to do, and that'll be enough for me.
And it's a lot of teasing about like, oh, you were able to activate these alien relics that are scattered around the galaxy that nobody else knows what to do with. It feels like precursor civilization story, which we've encountered a lot in the history of games alone. But then the interesting thing that they hadn't really shown before is they ended the direct with a tease of like the main character looking like they kind of have magical powers, probably derived from being able to interact with these relics and kind of making people levitate in a hallway. It's just like, okay, is that the interesting twist of the story? Is you will get more and more sci-fi abstract stuff throughout the game compared to when you start out and they're more in their NASA core aesthetic, as they're trying to emphasize here. But
NASA punk, right?
NASA punk, there it is. Yeah. The big thing too that came out afterwards is 30 frames per second on all Xboxes. PC obviously will still be unlimited and all that fun stuff, but people were pretty outraged. Kyle, how are you feeling about the idea of a first-party Microsoft game, big new IP, and it's going to be like, our most powerful console, the most powerful console on Earth, 30 frames a second?
It's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like.
Yeah, but Kyle, hang on, Kyle,
60.
stop. Come on, Kyle. This is podcasting, baby. I'm going to lob it up again. Kyle, how do you feel about Xbox, their big new IP on the most powerful console ever? 30 frames per second. What do you think, dude?
I think I want my money back for
Yeah!
everything.
Down
Every
with
console
Shut
Phil.
down Game Pass, refund everybody.
No,
No, I would.
Yeah,
I always go performance. I love playing a 60 FPS game, but like it's certainly not a deal breaker for me by any means.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
I played Morrowind at 10 frames a second back on the original Xbox. That's not much of an exaggeration. So if they can lock it in at 30, we'll be doing good for a Bethesda game.
They said they're locking in at 30. I joke, but it is certainly alarming and worth talking about that a big new Microsoft IP is only running at 30 on their super powerful console. It is just like really, guys? Really? Not a deal breaker, but just like, come on. It's just like, come on.
Do you want it delayed for another 2 years?
I don't care, sure.
I don't know. Sure. Yeah, honestly, I'm not in a rush to play it. I'm excited for it, but if you need another 12 months to get it up to 60, I'll wait, sure.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a hardware reflection. That's a Bethesda reflection.
Yeah.
Like the strength of of that studio, and they have a lot of strengths, but it has never been, technical for them.
Yep.
So.
Starfield. I'm glad we share the exact same mentality about that, Kyle. Just like we were curious, and now it's like, all right, no, I'm now excited to play this after that.
Yeah, I will play it for sure.
Yeah, and I think like it's interesting seeing Xbox's showcase. They were coming in at a real low spot, coming off of Redfall, and the kind of funny interview where Phil Spencer just. My memory is he just cried on camera and said, "We're so stupid, we're so stupid."
He was flogging himself.
Right? Yeah, it was uncomfortable. I can't believe Kind of Funny aired that. But then like the showcase, it really impressed. Like there's so much variety in there, and then also they were hitting it hard. And Sarah Bond from Microsoft was out there with the soaring music, the orchestral music of her just being like, "Games are great, and we're doing it, you guys. We're bringing them to you." And then Phil Spencer out there, he had the message too of just which I think was accurate of like, hey, remember in 2018 when we started buying all those studios? Like, now it's coming to fruition. Like, look at this stuff. We are there is kind of his tone for all this. And it's true. Like, we didn't see new Double Fine stuff or anything, but we saw Avowed real quick, the Obsidian RPG, which we had seen a tease of before. But just, Obsidian's killing it. And it's weird to go from talking about Starfield to talking about Avowed, because Starfield's like, it's a little... the character is a little rough looking and, maybe it could be better. And then Avowed, like another open world RPG. This is the one, if you don't remember, it's set in the same world as Pillars of Eternity from Obsidian. The director was a writer on Outer Worlds. I'm curious to see how much of that team went over to this versus went to Outer Worlds 2 and stuff. But anyways, the point is like this game, it looks a little budget-ish for an open world RPG, but what's wrong with me where that kind of got me excited? Is it just like classic Obsidian that I'm excited about, or what is it?
It's classic. Yeah, I think it's classic Obsidian. It's knowing that you're going to get what they're showing you, I think, a little bit.
Yep.
And knowing that ultimately, like, it looks fine for an Obsidian game. And you know that the things that you're going to get excited about for an Obsidian game, are at least going to look that good. And that's reason to get excited.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. And I saw the director at GDC. She gave a presentation and talked about like the team, and I think she said it was like around 100 people. So like definitely pretty small for making a game of this size. But yeah, it's an open world RPG, first person, and you're jumping around the living lands in the world of Pillars of Eternity from like island to island and all that stuff. But very fantasy, dual wield magic spells and all that stuff. But the cool thing too that I forgot, it's like, oh yeah, it's the Pillars world. So like they have swords and shields, but they also have like pistols and stuff, which I think would make it feel interesting, like having a pistol and then also magic.
But I don't think I knew that.
Yeah,
the Pillars thing.
Oh yeah,
is that new, or I just missed that detail in the past?
No, it was when they first revealed it. They showed it that way. Yeah.
Oh.
Cool. But yeah, Josh Sawyer, who was the lead for Pillars of Eternity, he isn't on it, which is interesting. I'm curious how much he's helping out overall there, because I think he's like studio creative director. But Avowed, super curious about it. 2024. There's a date on that one compared to a lot of other Microsoft stuff here that was still wait and see. Everybody, please. Another one that is coming to fruition from a studio they bought is Clockwork Revolution from In Exile. Kyle, how would you describe Clockwork Revolution?
I've heard people say BioClock.
Oh, that's good.
I was just going to say straight up BioShock Infinite.
Yeah.
It is.
It's just BioShock Infinite.
It is wild. I saw there's somebody who said like, hey, I think it was shared in like the MinnMax Discord. They get a load of this channel. But it's like, hey, I worked on the trailers for BioShock Infinite, so I'm just going to do like a frame-by-frame breakdown and comparison from Clockwork Revolution to BioShock Infinite, and it's wild. But Clockwork Revolution, I think it's worth preaching on its own, and looking into the history of it a little bit has helped differentiate it. But so it's In Exile who's developing this, Brian Fargo, old legendary developer. Wasteland 3 was the last game this studio made, which is kind of an isometric RPG that we're all like, yeah, that I'm sure it was good. But it's one of those games, like if you're into it, like I guess it just was excellent. It's 85% of Metacritic. Like this is a really talented team. I'm curious to see them working from an isometric RPG in Unity to working on Clockwork Revolution, like a first-person RPG, action RPG as they put it. Like that's a big lift. But the interesting thing is apparently it's very steampunk inspired, very BioShock Infinite for 1,000 different ways. But their angle and how they're messaging it is that apparently it's being led by Chad Moore and Jason Anderson, who were brought into In Exile in like 2019, and they had created an isometric RPG called Arcanum back in 2001 at the studio called Troika. and that's like a beloved steampunk RPG. So this is like the spiritual successor to this Arcanum game from 2001. And it's weird because, okay, this is the full map for this. But what's interesting is like that strategy of pulling in these folks, these old time RPG people to make some spiritual successor. It's very much the model that Obsidian took with the Outer Worlds, where they brought in Tim Kaine and Leonard to make the Outer Worlds in the spirit of Fallout, a series they had also created back in the day. And what's weird is that Tim and Leonard went after they worked on Fallout, and then they founded Troika, the studio, which is then the studio that made Arcanum. So it's like Microsoft pulling these old RPG legends to be like,
and
hey.
One had a secretary named Kennedy, and the other had a secretary named Lincoln.
There's a lot. There's a lot
insane.
in there. But the weird thing too is like, oh, it's steampunk and looks like BioShock Infinite. But then also the big premise is like you're playing with time, and it looks very BioShock Infinite that way. Where like I guess the idea is on the Xbox Wire thing, they say, quote, "You'll use a wondrous device known as the chronometer to travel back in time, choose how to influence the past, and then return to the present to experience the effects of your decisions as you try and like overthrow Lady Ironwood in this city called Avalon."
Yeah, that's super cool. And they said, kind of in response to the BioShock stuff, they reiterated that it's a full RPG system and that you create your character at the beginning of it too.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. And so go ahead. What's that, Jeff?
I'm definitely looking forward to that one as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And this was one where they said, quote, "coming in due time." So this might be a while, up there with Fable, for if they're not even feeling confident enough to put 2024 on the calendar. It's like, okay, that's alarming. But Kelsey, anything else you're dying to talk about that we haven't hit?
I really liked that. Was it 33 Immortals?
Yeah.
That the Spiritfarer developers are doing. I mean, the 33 player co-op in that looks like chaos, and I don't know if that part's going to be good. But like, just I don't know, seeing that art style with that combat was really look. I was like, that looks good.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. Yeah, Thunder Lotus, the developer of Spiritfarer, one of our favorites from 2021, I think. It was a really smart trailer because they're building it up, and we all in the reaction stream had the same question of like, wait, how many players is it? This is like a co-op thing. It just kept adding more and more. And it turns out it is a 33 player roguelite. Really,
a specific number. What a weird. They just 34 breaks it. I guess I don't know. That's what they discovered.
Also weird, Kyle. Just carrying on our conversation from last week. 33 Immortals is the name of this game. Immortals is the name of the faction in the new Prince of Persia they're dealing with. Immortals of Avium is the other game. And then Immortals Phoenix Rising, Ubisoft is also making a sequel to that. It is bizarre. There's another,
Well, apparently Prince of Persia is actually, the Immortals is like a Persian faction.
Right.
So that there is like historical relevancy there. No one else has an excuse.
No. Absolutely not.
Right.
Oh, South of Midnight, they also talk about how Shaken Bones, that big guy that was playing the guitar, he's an immortal figure called an Archon. So there's still kind of immortal beings in that one as well. So it's the season of dual protagonists and immortals, everybody. A ton of great stuff. I'm sure we missed a lot of stuff. Shout out in the comments for everything that we missed. We'll be talking about even more on the next episode of the MinnMax Show podcast. We'll get hands-on reports from what Sarah, Janet, and Leo actually played out there, all that fun stuff, and we'll try and mop up as much as possible. If I am here, I should point out, I might be tapping out for daddy duties because I'll be going out on paternity leave, and I don't know when that's going to happen, but there's a good chance it'll happen very soon. But hey, I think that's it. Everybody feeling good? Did we miss anything huge?
I mean, we still missed a lot of announcements because there were just so many. But I don't know, just stronger than I expected this year to be, I think.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm curious to hear from everybody that's out at Summer Game Fest what it was like out there for the mood. But, you know, Xbox really turned it around, and then Ubisoft had some interesting stuff in there, combined with some guys singing a song about Skull and Bones, which was the greatest presentation I've ever seen for Skull and Bones, was just their song. We don't need the gameplay anymore. We know what that is. But guys singing a pirate shanty, that ruled. All right, if you want to see more from any of these games and the stuff we missed, because we definitely missed a lot, you can check out MinnMax's reaction streams on our YouTube channel. Subscribe over there on our YouTube channel. It helps us in a big bad way. Jeff, do you know what else helps us in a big bad way?
No.
I'll tell you. Supporting us on Patreon. Patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. Support us at any tier. Find the tier that's right for you. I want to shout out some people at the Game Champion tier who supported us at the $50 tier, because I don't know if I'll get another chance to do it this month. So shout out the champion of Tokyo Jungle, Michael Berry, the champion of Sly 2, Band of Thieves is Procyon number 6, the champion of Super Castlevania 4, Roger Reichardt, Suikoden II, that's Takashi Kitano, Gotcha Force, Joshua Ayers, Gotcha Force. So I'm sorry, everybody. RobBobWill chose to be the champion of King's Quest 6, Heir Today, Gone Tomorrow. Excellent deep cut. Patrick Polk is the champion of Theatrhythm Final Bar Line, which is a diabolical choice. PrettyGoodPrinting.com, they're the champion of Descent. Zachary Pligge is the champion of Superman 64, of course. Jawarhello is the champion of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. Clement Zobel is the champion of Marvel's Midnight Suns. Another bold choice. I love it. Andrea Silva, still the champion of Dark Cloud. Thanks, everybody, for supporting us at that $50 tier, getting your name in the description for every MinnMax video, and locking in, once and for all, you're the champion of whatever the hell game you want, and then we'll have the big poll to determine what game we create bonus content about in the near future. All right, sweet. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for supporting MinnMax. Thanks for making all this possible. I'm so excited to talk to that crew that's out at Summer Game Fest, because that is something that very much so is only possible thanks to your support. But sweet. Kelsey, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I'm going to do it right this time. You can check out my podcast. I've got a podcast with the Video Game History Foundation called Video Game History Hour, and it's good if you like video game history.
I love that. You had a recent episode about Minesweeper, which I love the tone of the episode. It's just like, well, it's Minesweeper, but this is why your podcast is so good, because like, yeah, but we really don't know that much about the development of Minesweeper, and we really should. And so it's fun just to have a little bit of a deep dive into a game that everybody thinks they know, but no one really knows the true history of.
It's going to be a whole book.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, we talked to the author of the boss fight book, Kyle Orland, longtime video game journalist who has unearthed that entire story, which I think is such a cool choice.
Yeah, for sure. Kyle, anything you want to plug?
Kyle's book about Minesweeper.
This is how you plug.
Game Informer stuff. Check out Game Informer.
What does that mean?
Go to
If
the website, listen to the podcast, watch the YouTube channel.
But if they had to do one thing, I feel like just the general Game Informer is doing it. You got to be like, this is how you should support Game Informer, is to do blank.
We're selling individual issues right now for the first time, which is kind of fun.
Okay.
So you can go to GameStop.com/Game Informer, and you can buy individual issues, which is cool.
Like backstock?
Not backstock.
Oh, okay.
More recent issues, yeah.
Could you do
Never did
backstock?
that in the past, so it's cool.
Yeah, sweet. Again, sorry we don't have time for community questions, but we're saving that for the big show anyway, so we'll get to that on this Thursday's episode of the podcast, and we'll get the ads in there, and they get a load of this and all that fun stuff. But all right, thanks so much, everybody, for sharing and supporting MinnMax stuff throughout the Summer Game Fest season. We'll be back on Thursday with a new episode. Be good, have fun, let's go!